Okay, thank you all for joining us here today for this very special event, the presentation of the 7th Kate O'Brien Award for the best debut novel or short story collection by an Irish female writer. The award comes with a €2,000 prize, very generously sponsored by Bill and Denise Whelan. This is a wonderful gift, as it not only gives financial support to debut writers, but also adds to the significance of the award, making it an important one to aim for. So thank you, Bill and Denise, most sincerely. So we're delighted to have the shortlisted writers, the 6 of you here with us today: Sarah Gilmartin, Louise Kennedy, Annie McManus, Una Mannion, and Emer Ryan and Fiona Scarlett. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask each of the writers to tell us a little bit about their book and to read from it. And then hopefully after that, we will have time for questions either from the audience or the committee has prepared some questions, all easy ones. Okay, so we'll start in alphabetical order. And so we'll start with Sarah Gilmartin.
Hi, Vivian.
Hi, Sarah.
So would you like me just to read straight away from the book?
No, I just wondered if what would be nice, I think, for the audience, because some people will have read the book, some people won't have. So maybe we could just start by just explaining a little bit about the book, where the idea came from, and then read from it.
Absolutely.
We want to encourage people to buy them.
Sure. So Dinner Party is about a big, messy Irish farming family and the losses that have united and divided them over time. The main character is the youngest daughter in the family. Her name's Kate Gleeson, and her twin sister died when the girls were 16. And the opening section takes place in Kate's apartment in Dublin 16 years later. So she's around 32 and she's having a dinner party to mark the anniversary of her twin. And although she's tried to prepare everything just so, things don't quite go to plan, as family gatherings so often don't. And I guess from that point on, the novel looks at how and why the Gleeson family unraveled. I don't want to give too much away, but there's a formidable Irish mother at the centre of proceedings who provides much of the drama, but also hopefully a few laughs along the way. So tragedy is central, and the book looks at tough topics like grief and loss and mental illness, but underlined by dark humour and hope. And as a writer, it was important for me. I wanted to try and find a balance between the two things. Okay. So the section I'm going to read from now is quite close to the beginning, not right at the beginning, but Kate has been preparing all day to make sure everything goes well. And it's just before the people are about to come to her house for dinner. So between the chopping and the mincing and the rolling and the baking, the hours passed quickly. Her last job was to pipe meringue over the ice cream and slot the dessert into the freezer. When she finished the spikes, she stood back to admire her creation. She was proud of it, a mad-looking thing, like a jester's hat. All at once, the evening stretched in front of her, full of possibility. She opened the window over the sink as wide as it would go, and the fresh, salty wind came across the room. Outside, the light was low in the sky, a strip of pale blue between two bands of cloud. "Everything is okay," she said out loud to no one. At 10 to 7, she rushed into the bedroom and took off the silk dress that had seemed like such a good idea earlier in the week. The olive green did nothing for her complexion. Her mother was right. Kate's eyes were the wrong kind of brown, different to Elaine's, their amber warmth, the dark limbal rings around the iris, non-identical twins, fraternal twins, their mother used to say. If Kate had been able to salvage something of her sister's, it would have been her own. These were the kinds of terrible thoughts she'd been having for years. There was no one you could tell. The only person who would get it, who would, in fact, have been thrilled to hear it, was dead. After ransacking the wardrobe, Kate put on her black wrap dress and reapplied concealer to the crusty patch beside her lip, leaving a hallmark as she leaned closer to the mirror. The doorbell gave a jerky ring. She took one last look at her reflection and told herself to move. At the hall table, she stopped and lit the tea lights in the pumpkin before opening the door. "Hello, hello, hi, how are you?" Everyone spoke at once, then stopped at the same time. And there was a moment, A split second where Kate thought she might quickly close the door in their faces without them noticing, but no. Her brothers were right there, standing like little and large bodyguards on either side of Liz. Kate, said Ray, as if he didn't know her. Liz looked beyond her into the apartment. She'd had her hair done, the blonde ends feathery. You look gorgeous, Liz, Kate said, ushering them into the hall. I love the hair. Sullivan, I'll book you in. You won't know yourself. Liz left a moist kiss on Kate's cheek. Ray said, only €1,000 a go, extra for the grey bits. He patted his own hair, which was mostly black and stiff with gel. They all laughed, a trifle too loudly and for too long. The pumpkin light seemed to grow in thin, lambent fingers up the wall. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Very lovely reading. Okay, we'll move then on to Louise Kennedy.
Hi, so mine is a collection of short stories. It's called The End of the World is a cul-de-sac, so there are 15 stories and they are set either obviously or kind of, I don't know, in my imagination, they're set somewhere in the Northwest, and some of them are in places that are recognizable, maybe in Sligo and Leitrim, and some of them are in this kind of weird sort of, I mean, border land, I guess it is really. I suppose the stories are about, I mean, they're probably about shit relationships and about women trying to, I don't know, about just women trying to accommodate maybe men sometimes, but children and other responsibilities in their lives, and still, I suppose, trying to retain some sort of inner life to varying degrees of success. So I'm going to read from one of the stories. It's called Beyond Carthage, and it's about two women who are old friends who've gone on a package holiday to Tunisia off season in March. And one of them doesn't even know where she is. She thought they were going to Lanzarote or somewhere. And so they have been in a kind of pretty horrible concrete hotel for around 4 days and are slowly losing their minds. So they've just got bedded into the duty-free Bacardi and have just booked to go to a hammam for the afternoon for some treatment. Stick the glasses on. Reception called to say their car had arrived. They weren't ready. Therese didn't have time to brush her teeth and her mouth was waxy from eating nuts. On the way down, Noreen answered everything Therese said with a loose laugh. When the lift doors opened, the few people who were sitting around the foyer were looking in their direction. Noreen's guffaw was clearly audible from a couple of floors away. A tall, slim man in jeans and a suit jacket was waiting by the desk. He said his name was Giuseppe. He brought them outside to his car, a model of Fiat that Therese had never seen before. Noreen sat in the front beside him. Loving the motor, she said. Giuseppe put a plastic card in a slot and the dashboard lit up. Buongiorno, said a deep electronic male voice. Buongiorno yourself, said Noreen, and slapped her thigh. Her movements had become expansive and inaccurate, and she knocked her elbow against the back of Giuseppe's hand. The gold Rolex watch on his wrist was loose and made a tinny jangle. Are you French, Giuseppe? Italiano. Very nice, said Noreen. Therese bit the inside of her cheeks to keep a laugh in. Noreen looked at her in the rearview mirror and stuck her tongue out. Giuseppe braked hard when he needed to slow and took corners in third gear. When they got out, Therese put her hands on the roof of the car to steady herself. The flyer had shown a traditional bathhouse. They were outside the annex to an office block, a flat-roofed concrete building with a row of high windows. Inside, they were greeted by a young woman wearing a white tunic and trousers like a nurse's uniform. She was heavily made up, her hair covered by a scarf. She led them into a changing room, gave them baskets for their belongings. She handed each of them a towel and a piece of turquoise tissue paper. Noreen unfolded hers. It was a pair of disposable knickers. She held them up in front of Therese's face and tugged the elastic on the waistband in and out. "Ah, here," said Therese. They undressed with care, folding each garment as it was removed, placing it in the basket. The paper rustled beneath their towels as they wriggled into the surgical pants. Just as they were ready, Giuseppe came into the room. Therese looked around the walls and ceiling. He'd come in so promptly she wondered had he been watching them on a monitor. She and Noreen stood side by side, their feet in white cotton slippers. Giuseppe stepped forward and tugged their towels away. It reminded Therese of a trick she'd seen on TV when she was a child involving a tablecloth and stacks of clattery china. Giuseppe looked at Therese's body for a second longer than was polite. His removal of the towel was so flamboyant he'd lose face by giving it back to her. Noreen crossed her arms over her breasts. They squashed out above and below, blue-veined and creamy like Stilton.
Thank you very much. Very good reading, lovely. Now, Annie, hi, and you can tell us a little bit about your book.
Yeah, hi everyone. My book is called Mother Mother, and it is set in Belfast. It's about a kind of dual narrative of a mum, Mary McConnell, and her son, TJ McConnell. And it starts with TJ waking up in the house that he shares with his mum, and she's not there, which is very unusual. And the book is kind of TJ's journey in looking for his mum, but also Mary, his mum's journey in the present in terms of where she's going, and also flashbacks to her life as a child growing up. So you kind of see zoomed in scenes of her entire life from when she was about 8 years old up to now, and hopefully the reader gets a kind of understanding of why she might be doing this kind of very unusual move of just leaving home and not knowing where she's going. So I'll read you a little chapter after she had her baby, and this is about 3 months after her baby's born, and she's in her house that she shares with her dad and her brother. Her father was waiting for her. She saw his stooping silhouette through the glass of the back door as they walked into the kitchen. He turned around on hearing the baby's cries and opened the door to greet them. There was a smell of rotting food coming from the direction of the bin. In a saucepan on the hob, a thin layer of white mold grew on some vegetable soup like morning frost. Mary stood in the middle of the room, her arm wrapped around her son, who was locked into the crook of her hip. She wore a tracksuit with white congealed stains around the sweatshirt collar and a pair of fluffy slippers and socks. Her bag was slung over her shoulders, holding a week's worth of baby things inside. Nappies, wipes, nappy bags, nipple cream, his bottle, his formula, his soothers, his blankie. It was endless, the list of things her baby demanded. She named him Anthony. She liked how strong it sounded, how it commanded several different parts of your tongue to say it. It was a commitment. His middle name was her father's, Joseph. Somehow in the chaos of the first few months, she didn't know how or when he had become Tony and then TJ. "You all set?" her father said as his eyes took them both in. "I don't want to go." TJ had been crying on and off all morning. She knew he carried her tension with him, soaked up into his little folds of flesh. He looked warily at her father and started to cry again, his tiny fists pushing against her shoulders. Her father frowned at his grandson and huffed out the words. "Sure, it's for your own good. The nurse said." "I'm grand," she said crossly, but she knew she wasn't grand. She had read enough magazines and seen enough mothers cooing into their prams to know that it was all wrong. It was the health visitor who intervened. Lynn was an older woman, somewhere in her 50s, who was bigger than the clothes she wore and seemed to melt out and over them. She smelt of cigarettes and her hair was dyed a fluorescent auburn that made Mary's eyes smart. She visited 3 times in total. The first Mary couldn't even remember. The second involved Mary taking a lot of persuasion to let Lynn into the house at all. Once inside, she could see her behavior reflected on Lynn's face, and she couldn't do anything to stop it. She drifted from tears to maniacal giggling, then back to sobbing. The third time, Lynn gave no warning. Mary was asleep, sitting upright on the sofa. TJ was asleep on his back, splayed out across her knees. Her left breast was exposed between a muslin cloth and her shirt. Lynn knocked 4 times at the door and eventually peered through the window and knocked on the glass until Mary woke up. "How do you think you're doing, Mary?" "I don't know." She knew there was something not right about the fact that day and night felt like the same place, and that when she looked in the mirror, she saw a strange, broken girl, someone she didn't know. In the darkest recesses of her thoughts, she knew that sometimes this broken girl wished bad upon her baby. The voices came and went, vivid as dreams. They spoke of the bad things that could happen to him if she didn't look after him. They spoke of the bad things that would happen to her if she didn't feed him when he wanted. The worst was his crying at night. It pierced her like a blade. She would do anything to stop it.
Thank you, Annie. Very powerful reading. So we're halfway through. I suppose everybody now wants to dash out and buy those books so far. Okay, so we'll move on then to Una, okay?
Hi, thank you. My book is A Crooked Tree. It is about an Irish-American family in the summer of 1981. The book opens with the scene. It's a single mum, she's 5 kids, and the Irish father, who was an immigrant, had predeceased about a year before the events of the book. And the book opens, the mother puts a child out of the car at dusk, and it kind of sets off a series of events that summer. And I suppose the book itself is about a family kind of falling apart over the course of the summer. And I'm going to read from a particular moment in the book where the children, the mother has a secret boyfriend. The children have never met him. And they believe that he's the father of their youngest sibling. And the youngest sibling has met them, but none of the other kids have ever met him. So the mother leaves in the middle of the night with a young child to sneak out and meet him. And this kind of thing is going on. So they're always trying to guess who he might be and could they possibly know him, and they imagine occupations for him. But the narrator's best friend gets to meet him. And so the narrator is 15 years old, and this is her best friend, Sage, is 16. Sage met Bill in a snowstorm. It was during the unexpected blizzard earlier that year. She was at the mall working when the snow started. By the time she got on the bus for home, the roads were nearly impassable, and the snow was still falling in a whirl of thick flakes. Her bus crawled up Route 23 to the base of the mountain. The driver let her off. There was no one there to meet her, so she started to climb the road just in her uniform and a thin coat. Night had fallen, and there were no tire tracks. No car had even tried to make it up. She'd walked for nearly an hour when she started to get scared. Her legs were soaking wet and freezing. The snow had reached her knees and was still falling. She had another 2 miles to go and started to think she might have to find a house for help when she heard a low thrum and saw headlights in the distance. There was a truck making its way up through the snow, spinning some, but never stopping. She stood to the side of the road and watched as it approached, hoping the driver could see her in the dark through the blue haze. She could hear the heavy chains wrapped around the wheels, giving it traction. It pulled in beside her, and the passenger door opened. She didn't recognize the truck. She said it was red and oversized, one of those king cabs, and she looked in. My mother was sliding over to make room, and a man Sage didn't know was driving. They continued up the hill in silence. Sage said she'd been so cold and it was so dark she never got a good look at him. She saw him in profile when she got out. He was broad, wore a brown suede coat with sheepskin lining. Sage called her house the second she got inside, her voice shaking with cold and excitement. I met Bill. He drove me up the mountain with your mom. They're on their way to your street. I hung up the phone, shouting for everyone to come quick. Bill was on his way. In a minute, we were in the rec room pulling on our Irish Wellington boots underneath nightgowns and over pajamas, all 5 of us, Marie, Thomas, me, Ellen, and even Beatrice, who'd probably just seen him a few days earlier. We galloped like lunatics down the drive, falling into the snow with no coats. Struggling up, we staggered forward, lifting our legs high. The snow was too heavy and deep to kick through, and it fell into the open tops of my boots, freezing my bare feet. Several times I walked right out of them. We ran and fell, elated that we might finally catch sight of him. Shh, said Thomas. We stopped. It was so quiet and still. Snowfall at night casts its own strange spell. When I looked up toward the lights, I could see the thick flakes still falling. I heard a door slam, Thomas whispered. And then we heard the rumble of the truck starting up at the top of the street and watched as a streak of red taillights disappeared in the haze of snowfall. A dark figure was trudging down the road towards us, my mother. We turned to get back inside the house before her. We'd missed him. We'd missed the best chance we ever had.
Thank you, Una. Another powerful reading, gives you plenty to think about. Okay, we've got two more. Emer, you okay?
Hi, Vivian. Thanks
Hi.
very much. So my book is called Holding Her Breath. It's a coming of age story about identity, grief, and family secrets. And the main protagonist, Beth, is a swimmer, as you can see from the cover. She's kind of a former elite swimmer who had to quit suddenly after a mental health crisis, and she's now kind of gradually finding her way back to the pool. And as part of her journey then throughout the book as well is kind of digging into a family mystery about her late grandfather, the tragic poet Benjamin Crow. So in the section I'm going to read, Beth has just started university and she's kind of trying to adjust to a new way of living. And we also meet her roommate Sadie from Tipperary, who is very intrigued by Beth's literary heritage. Sadie has taken Beth's early intrusion as tacit permission to pop into Beth's room unannounced anytime she likes. She is constantly borrowing and lending. She finishes Beth's milk and puts the empty carton back in the fridge. In the mornings, she hands over her scarf or her Ray-Bans, insisting they look better on Beth anyway. Beth quickly settles into a routine. She is only required to train with the university swim team 3 evenings a week, and supplements this with gym sessions and lone swims. Breaststroke is her best race, but butterfly is her favourite. It's the most optimistic stroke, she thinks. All that power, all that extravagant splashing. She used to pretend she was swimming the English Channel, or wreck diving, or touching the wall at the Olympics. Now she just follows the dark line of tile to the opposite end, flips, repeats. Afterwards, her mind is clear as an evacuated building. Sometimes old patterns intrude. She occasionally still wakes before dawn, her body anticipating an early morning pool session. Other habits persist. The protein and potassium-rich breakfasts of porridge with chopped banana, scrambled eggs and chocolate milk, the reflexive refusal of chips in the dining hall. You eat like a convalescent, Sadie observes, watching Beth sit down to brown rice and broccoli. Sadie is as fascinated by Beth's swim schedule as Beth is by Sadie's ability to style an effortless French braid. How do you do it? She asks one evening as Beth heads out with her swim bag over her shoulder. Do you ever just want a break? I already had a break, feels too complicated to explain. It's easier to just stay going, Beth says. Like a shark, Sadie says, clapping her hands. You're like a shark. Another time, Sadie offers, swimming is cool. We're like our most primitive selves in the water. Have you ever noticed how if you just relax in the pool, you end up in the fetal position? I've noticed, Sadie. It's like the animal part of us is always trying to go back to the womb. Do you swim yourself? Beth asks. Oh God, no, sure, I'm from a landlocked county. I never learned. Beth, on the other hand, has been in the water since Alice enrolled her in a swimming class for infants. She has photos of a graduation ceremony where they were all dressed in tiny robes and presented with rolled up certificates they could barely hold. Alice told her that for the final exam, all the mothers had to throw their babies into the pool. She waited with her heart in her throat for Beth to kick to the surface, tiny limbs splayed, a starfish.
Thank you, Emer. Lovely, lovely reading. Now, Fiona, you've had to wait all this time.
The curse of the S surname. Yeah. Hi, everyone. So my book is Boys Don't Cry, and it centres around 2 brothers. There's 12-year-old Finn and 17-year-old Joe, and it's set in inner city Dublin, and it's dual narrative. So Finn details the events leading up to a tragedy, and Joe then details the events and the aftermath of that tragedy. And it's really an exploration of grief and love, ultimately love, really, I think. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read from the very first time that we see Joe. I'm getting closer now, and the 4 towers are in view: Gandhi, Mandela, King, and Bijaksu, each tower named after someone who inspired change, hoping that the names would rub off on the dossing, sponging bastards who existed there. Of course, we lived in Bijaksu, or the Jacks as it's more fondly known. Could they not just have fucking called it Teresa? It's a scorcher, which means everyone is out getting that healthy Irish burn. Lads bare-chested, toddlers stripped to their nappies, and little shits out in forest with their water guns and balloons soaking anything that moves. I get to the jacks and enter the stairwell, and the heat has just intensified the unidentifiable bang of the place. The rusted Dublin City Council no ball game sign has finally fallen and is fighting for space amongst the discarded syringes and smoke boxes and dried in gank. I used to hide funny messages for Finn amongst the endless scribbles of graffiti plaster on the walls. He'd spend ages looking for them, searching between Tina is a leg opener and Anta was here and Jimmy is gay, and would always answer back. That's how I knew he'd found it, his spider scrawl there right next to mine. As I'm climbing the stairs, David Carthy is in his regular spot, the corner between floors 3 and 4, giving him enough of a head start in either direction if needed. He's all encased in thick, sweet smoke and off his head on whatever the fuck sample he's helped himself to today. He better watch it. Desi Murphy doesn't do freebies. All right, Joe, David calls out as I pass. David, I say, nodding and continue on up. How's your da? He asks. Fucked if I know, I say over my shoulder. Well, you can tell him thanks for me. Business is booming since his holiday shays joy. Looks it, yeah, I say, and I can see the crimson come to his face and his fist clench, but he won't fucking touch me. No one will. They're all afraid of Da. I push my way through onto the landing of floor 10, and the wall of the veranda has been repainted, wibbled and white according to the tin. Michael from 101B does the honours twice a year. Has to look the part, he says. Desi Murphy may own the stairwells, but we take ownership of our landings. Welcome mats are placed at doors, window boxes hang from ledges, and Josie from 104B has 2 little porcelain frogs on either side of her entrance, all the way from Santa Ponza, she says. Our window boxes lie empty. Ma didn't plant them this year. I take a look over the veranda, squinting at the unusually clear blue skies, Dublin Mountains to the left and Dublin Bay to the right. Fuck, you couldn't pay for that view. In the time before I'd be legging it in to get Finn and darted out to Dollymount, spend the day building sandcastles and swimming in the sea. I put my key in the door and the smell hits me first. Bacardi and Marlborough Whites, followed closely by the moist, enclosed darkness. I heave apart the curtains, push open the windows and start cleaning up around Ma, who is spread unconscious on the couch. I put one hand behind her head, another across her chest and roll her onto her side. I get the fleece blanket from Finn's bed, his favourite Captain America one, and place it over her, tucking it in under her chin. I go to the press under the sink, root around for the black sacks, and there it is, right at the back where I'd left it, cobwebbed, forgotten. I reach out to touch it, but pull myself back, not ready yet to face it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fiona. It's another beautiful reading. Now, we have time for questions. I have some prepared questions. I don't know if any of the audience have put in a question yet, but I'll start and then anyone can interrupt me. So I thought it'd be fair if I asked each of you a question. So I'm going to start with Fiona because it's not fair to go back to Sarah again. This is the good thing about having the S, Fiona. The question I'd like to ask, how would you describe your writing process?
Oh, I don't really have a process. For me, it's just grabbing any little space of time that you can. I'm definitely not somebody who writes every day, and I'm on a career break this year, and I thought, oh, you know, I'm on a career break now, I'm going to be there writing loads and loads. But no, I think I do a lot of thinking time. Like, that's definitely a huge part of my process, and a lot of stuff that comes to me is away from the page, so out on a walk or in the shower or whatever. And I write in spurts. So I don't know if that's a process, but that's what works for me anyway. And
are you working on another book at the moment?
Yeah, so I'm getting another book ready at the moment to send to the publisher. So fingers crossed.
Great. Okay, thank you. Who will I go to next? I'll go to Emer. Emer, do you have a favorite literary hero or heroine?
Oh wow, do you mean in terms of writer? I think my literary heroine would be Amy Hempel, who is the great American short story writer. she's one of those rare writers, I think, that has never written a novel. She's always kind of stayed in the short story form, and she writes a lovely little slim book every decade or so, and it's always astonishing. And yeah, she writes a lot about her work is just very, her style is very minimalist. It's very funny. It's very tender. She writes a lot about dogs, actually. And it's always heartbreaking and moving. And yeah, I absolutely love her work, and always look forward to a new book by Amy Hempel.
Okay, that's great. List for people. People can make lists now at the end of this. Okay, Una. Okay, these are questions I've been given. So, John Fowles never began a novel without knowing the final sentence. How sure were you of your ending when you began?
I think I didn't know the in-between part. And I don't know, when I began writing, I didn't, I'm definitely one of those people that writes without a plot outlined, I kind of write into the abyss. But I had an image at the very start, which was the mother putting the child out on the road. And I had the very last image of a child in the dark trying to cut grass with scissors at night to try to put order. And so I kind of knew the first image and the last image, and the in-between part, I think, is what I didn't know. So I'm definitely, it's panicky to write and not know exactly what's going to happen, but I think it also opens up, all kinds of possibilities. And I don't really think, I wish I had a clear, even now as I'm writing, I think, oh, if I only knew exactly, but that's part of it. And I think when Fiona was talking about like walking and thinking and, taking a shower and like, when you're in it and thinking about it and something resolves or you understand it. I love that part of it.
Okay, thank you very much. Annie, every book is a contract between writer and reader. In reading, the writer's selves are revealed by inhabiting your story. In writing this book, what of yourself was revealed?
I mean, I've realized, doing promo for books, which is also new to me, is that the first thing everyone asks is, where did this book come from? And I still don't have an answer, I'm afraid. I really wish I did, but there's a lot in the book about motherhood. And I think at the time of writing the book, I was deep in the throes of motherhood, having 2 young children. So it was a lot of kind of trying to find pockets of time to go and write when I could. So I think just mothering was kind of very dominant in my head. And I think that came out of me onto the page. And also Belfast, which is where I set it. Again, like Una, I had no plotting strategy or skills at all. I just had an idea of an image of a woman in water up to her waist, that I kind of was working towards in terms of an ending. And I liked not knowing what was going to happen, and I liked discovering what was going to happen as it happened. But I do think that there was something about putting it in Belfast that was me reflecting on my life, reaching the age of kind of 41, looking back at my life and realizing that the 3 years I spent in Belfast at university were hugely important to me. And I think there was a kind of aspect of wanting to kind of explore what Belfast as a city did to shape me as a person. And also my mom brought me to Belfast when I went to go and apply for university there. She came with me on that journey. She's from Northern Ireland, so I think there's a lot of motherly associations kind of enmeshed in Belfast for me as well. Hope that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, that's, thank you, Annie. Thank you. Louise, there's a question here. What special book would you never lend?
God, that's actually a really depressing question, because I think I went looking for a book last week that I've clearly lent to somebody I'm never going to see again. So I think I'm never going to lend anything ever again. But I particularly wouldn't lend my copy of Lost Lives, you know, the big, huge book that documents every death in the Troubles. It's been out of print for a long time, and it's insanely expensive. So I wouldn't lend that. Or anything else for that matter.
No, not just that you've lost it. Sarah, this is probably a funny question to ask you, because it's probably, well, the reason I'm asking is because I'm really interested in what writers read. So obviously reading is a big part of your life, but what books have influenced you or inspired you? I think you're on mute, Sarah.
Okay, I think I'm back.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a big part of my life because I read for the day job as well. I'm a reviewer, so I read in that aspect. For Dinner Party in particular, Anne Enright, Everything and Anything by Anne Enright, but particularly her novel, her great novel about family, The Green Road. Also Anne Tyler, Dinner at the Homesick Restaurant. Personality by the Scottish writer Andrew O'Hagan. It's a great book about a singer in the 60s from Scotland and about celebrity and the darker aspects of fame. And also, yeah, I was thinking about this last week. One book that, you know, doesn't really have anything to do with my book on face of it, but that has really stayed with me since I read it is Roddy Doyle's Smile. It's just a book that deals really sensitively and originally with the subject of shame, and I've thought a lot about it. I read it when it came out, and then I read it again a couple of months ago. It's a great book.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have any questions from the audience?
Nothing has come in on the Q&A, but you could also just use the chat function just if anybody wanted to ask any questions. And I suppose if any of our authors particularly wanted to answer somebody else's question, was there anything in there that you really wanted to give us a chance to talk about your literary hero or the book you'd never lend? It would be great to hear from the others. If somebody else got a question that you had a ready answer for, we'd love to hear.
Yeah, the book, anyone want to answer the book you'd never lend? So I think that's great.
I have a copy of Peg Sayers when I was in school that's still got the cover on it that my mom put, you know, she used to cover our books in wallpaper, and it got passed down from my brother to my sister to my brother to me, and it's got everyone's scribblings in it and crossing out and giving her the picture on the front of Peg has got like on the inside of Peg's got like glasses and a mustache like drawn on her, and there's it feels like a bit of a relic that I don't think anyone would want because it's been ruined, but it means a lot.
Okay.
Anybody nostalgia else? There, Annie.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe in that same vein of, you know, books that you would have had in school, probably the poetry anthology that we had for our Leaving Cert, Soundings. Again, because, you know, they're poems that even though, you know, it's 20 years later, would have stayed with me over time. And also you've got all the kind of little notes that you would have written as a teenager, both about the poetry and whatever else was going on in your teenage life. So I guess that kind of personal connection to a book can mean a lot.
And Soundings was reissued recently, well, a couple of years ago, which is great. Emer, have you a book you wouldn't lend?
My grandfather actually wrote, he was a local historian and a great GAA man as well, and he wrote a biography of the first president of the GAA, Maurice Davin, and it was a small print run, and I'd say it'd be hard to get these days, so I'd never lend that out because yeah, it's precious, and yeah, it reminds me of what a great person he was, and he's also the only other writer in the extended family, so he was a huge inspiration to me growing up. I have a very vivid image of him sitting at his typewriter hammering away in his living room, and that always kind of stuck with me, and he was kind of a model for me, I suppose, of a working writer, you know, someone who kind of went to the desk every day and worked, and I'd say something about that kind of lodged in my mind when I was young.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Do anybody of the committee who are in the background do you want to ask a question? No? Anyway, I can ask another.
I would have a question.
Okay, good.
Yeah. I just wanted to know, what strategies do you use to proofread your work?
I'll put it in a drawer for about 6 weeks and don't go near it, and then come back to it with the benefit of being removed from all the writing that I thought was amazing, or thought might have been good, and then see it for what it really is. It's a lot easier to cross out whole swathes of work when you have a bit of distance from it. So that's how I do it.
I think, the thing about reading the work out aloud, and even today, before we came on air, I crossed out loads of lines. Like it's, because really, like, you should read the whole book aloud, before it goes to print. But even now, still, every time I go to read something, and I practice it, I'm just like, oh, so I think that process is good, to hear it. And I think,
sorry, go on.
I think what Annie was saying as well, sometimes like you're in the throes of it and you think this is like, this lyrical reach, and you read it out loud and you realize like, no, it's not working. So
Louise, you were going to add
Yeah, I think sometimes you can only bring it to a certain point yourself, and then you have to give it to somebody else, because very often all you can see is your intention. And that if you're really deep in it, even if you do manage to get away from it for a while, which Annie, I just wrote a novel, like this book that I was talking about is short stories, but with the novel, I found that if I had to get away, like stay away from it for a few days, it was like starting from scratch. It was really hard to try and get back in again.
I do it after a draft. So you do a draft, then you put it in a drawer, and then you come back and read it as a whole, and then you're able to kind of see the wood for the trees in terms of what the book is. Rather than that's how I mean. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. Because even like 2 days away from it, I just like, we think it's all falling apart and collapsing around me. But yeah, giving it to somebody else is good as well, where they can see that you've written things that are like mad or corny, or that the exact same sentence was there like 3 pages earlier and stuff and you didn't notice, or you've used the same word about 11 times in 2,000 words. Like that.
a question.
I have a question, Vivian, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's perfect.
I'd love to know the one piece of advice any of the women would give to other writers.
I'd say just get your arse in the chair as often as you can. Stop feeling sorry for yourself.
How would you top that?
No, but it's like, do you know what I mean? A lot of people, it's like, oh, it's the agony of it and everything. Sure, it's great, really, isn't it? I mean, it's like, I sort of hate writing, but it's great to be able to find the time or do it, or just to have that party that nobody else can get near.
I think it's also to demystify it a bit. Like, I think to get your arse in the chair, as Louise succinctly put it, but a lot of that is like, sometimes we're insecure, like have all the self-doubt, and I think it's a little bit like, I think we have to demystify, this romantic idea of the artist or the writer or whatever it might be, and it's an open club. And I think maybe women in particular might have a little bit more of that bit socialized, in the past, to have less confidence around it. So yeah, I think sit in the chair and write.
And if one thing,
Sorry.
if one thing doesn't work, because it's a tough enough industry, try something else, because if you don't get back in the chair after one thing not working, then you're not going to do something else. So just to keep it and move on if something doesn't work.
Just to say, just two comments in there from the audience. So Pippa Slattery says just how inspiring today has been, and that she's going to have a hefty book bill this month. So, so if anybody wants to make a contribution to Pippa's O'Mahony's account, she'd appreciate it. Congratulations to all 6 authors. And then Amy Gaffney has a question. She says, does anyone ever feel that there's a danger in losing something special when editing, being that as the writer, there's a lot of story background that you just intrinsically know? Is there a danger that that gets lost in the edit?
No, I don't.
I have a question. It's how much do you find writing is a meditative process as well, in terms of, you know, self-reflection, that you're actually having to explore parts of yourself too that you might find challenging? And how do you find writing a way of resolving that?
Yeah, it's
That's a general question. It's not specific to anybody.
I always think of what Kevin Barry says about, you know, when you're writing, and if you feel deeply uncomfortable and embarrassed, that's probably a sign that you're getting to something real and something genuine. And it can be hard, like, to kind of work through that sense of discomfort. But I've kind of tried to learn to lean into it and kind of remember that it's a sign that you are digging deep and trying to get to something real that other people then will, it will resonate with other people as well.
Yeah. Sometimes it throws up a lot more questions and answers as well, which is kind of great.
So I think that concludes our questions section, Vivian, which draws us back to you for the most important question of all.
Okay, so you can see all the people listening in that we have a wonderful, wonderful shortlist, and I would highly recommend them all. I just want to thank my fellow judges, Niall McMonagle, Marie Hackett, Donal Ryan and Gráinne O'Brien, for their insightful and perceptive reading. The journeys we were taken on were unique and exciting, in books that were very well written, richly imaginative and intriguing reading. So it was very, very hard to finally decide on the winner. And the Kate O'Brien Award is for a novel or a short story collection of excellence. And the poignant, beautifully written, tender and compelling novel, A Crooked Tree by Una Mannion, is our very worthy winner for 2022. Woo! So congratulations, Una. We were taking on an amazing journey. A very, very powerful, very, very poignant book. So would you like to say something? It's a bit hard.
Sorry, I'm a little,
yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much to the panel. I'm a little bit bowled over, sorry. And to all the women here who, like, I just even like listening to you in the last half hour has been so gorgeous. I've met some of you, but not all of you. But I admire all your writing, and I'm really, really honored and really inarticulate at the moment. So I'm very sorry. Thank you. Like, thank you very, very much.
It's put on the spot, but we're delighted that you are so moved by winning, because to me it's such an important award, because in Kate O'Brien's honour, and Kate O'Brien herself was an amazing writer, and a writer who was banned during her lifetime, and I think she would be extremely proud to be here today, to be listening to all 6 of you, and also to mention that the other submissions, we were really taken on wonderful, wonderful journeys. So congratulations, Una. We're delighted. We are giving, we've got to get you to sign a copy sometime. Obviously can't now, because we're giving it as a prize for people. So I hope you come down to O'Mahony's bookshop and sign lots of books. Thank you very much. And thank you to all the shortlisted writers for your wonderful books and for sharing them with us. We really love the journey. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thanks to everybody for joining us today. As we have mentioned across our social media channels, that this year the festival, which normally would be taking place this weekend, has been moved. I'll turn on my video so you can see, has been moved to June 18th and 19th. A lot of our planning has to take place over Christmas, and it was just such an uncertain time that we didn't feel that we could confidently go ahead with the festival in February. So we look forward to you joining us June 18th and 19th here in Limerick across a number of venues, and we look forward to bringing in person for the first time in 2 years all of our readers and writers together. As I said, we're immensely proud of all of the people who've been shortlisted for this year and the 7 years that have gone before it. We do our best to support female Irish writers in making their debut, and all of our shortlisted writers mean a lot to us, and we look forward to working with you over the coming years as your careers flower and go forward. We hope to see you all at the festival at some stage in various guises. Congratulations to Una, and as I said, we will be sending out information in the coming months about the festival over June 18th and 19th, and we look forward to seeing you all there. So thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you all again soon.